Good morning, doctors. The chairman for today's session is Dr. Raghav Ram Sukul. The co-chairman is Professor Subhash, Dr. Nibha Anand, Dr. Kalpana Narendran, Dr. Chawla Urmil, Dr. Promita Sanatani, Dr. Binay Prasad, and the speaker for today is Dr. Mihir Trilok Kothari.
Hello,
Dr. Mihir, can
Yes.
you please unmute yourself and start the presentation?
It's already unmute, but the host has disabled the participant screen sharing.
Okay.
I think the voice is echoing a lot. Kindly look into this.
Yes, doctor.
I'm sorry, it's still showing me the host has disabled the participant screen sharing.
Allow.
Okay, now it's open. One
It's
second.
open? Okay.
Yeah.
Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Yeah, they are visible. Make it slideshow. Make it slideshow.
Yes, sir. May I start?
Yeah.
Yes, please start.
So, good morning, friends. Thank you for this opportunity to present this work on a new technique for correction of complete lateral rectus palsy by transposing split medial rectus muscle, only one half of it, temporally. We have no financial conflicts in this work. It's well known since 2013, Goki-Git procedure, which involves splitting the lateral rectus and transposing it medially, is reasonably successful treatment for the correction of complete third nerve palsies. As you see over here, results are quite wonderful in a lot of patients. Following this, in 2020, there was a case series of 2 patients in which a similar principle was utilized for treatment of complete sixth nerve palsy. As you see over here, the first case reported in this paper, size paper, had a significant esotropia of around 60 prism diopter, which got almost completely corrected with the split transposition of medial rectus muscle laterally. However, they reported a high overcorrection in the second patient, as you see on the right side. We do realize that there are potential complications of transposing both the halves of split muscle to the opposite side, namely overcorrections as well as undercorrections, inability to do the adjustment post-operatively, lack of abduction and adduction post-operatively, induction or leaving some amount of vertical deviation because you're not working on the vertical muscles. And of course, if there is clamping of the vortex veins or the optic nerve, then you can get vision-threatening complications. Hence, we decided to transpose only part of the split rectus muscle. And in this particular case report, we transposed medial rectus lower 2/3 temporally to correct complete LR palsy. This slide shows the consent of publication as well as presentation from the patient's parents. This panel shows this particular 9-year-old child who at 5 years of age developed rhabdomyosarcoma, which was diagnosed with an incisive biopsy followed by partial exentration, removal of lateral rectus muscle, orbital bone, as well as the orbital fat and septum in the lateral compartment of the orbit. Patient had developed enophthalmos following that, significant esotropia as you see over here, and received 7+3 cycles of chemotherapy, 3 drugs, and 45 GY of radiotherapy. When he presented at 9 years to us, he complained of double vision, which was essentially horizontal and uncrossed. His vision in the right eye was 6/60. Though we couldn't find the optic neuropathy, no RAPD was there. VEP was refused by the patient. There was a V pattern, 35 prism diopter of esotropia, with a very small 4 prism diopter of right over left, and an abduction restriction of -6, with a tight medial rectus of around +3 to +4 on forced duction test, which was repeated under general anesthesia. These are some panels showing how we performed the surgery. Under general anesthesia, the horizontal Holmes dots were marked so that we don't induce a torsion. The medial rectus was separated and split up to 15 millimeter posteriorly. Upper 1/3 and lower 2/3 was divided. The upper 1/3 was infraplaced and attached 12 millimeters behind the insertion directly on the sclera, followed by, as you see over here, there is a Skippens hook over here, and the medial rectus lower half is getting threaded into the Skippens hook and being mobilized temporally. 6.5 millimeter behind the limbus, near the insertion of the previous lateral rectus muscle, this medial rectus lower 2/3 was attached using a 6-0 Vicryl suture, and an application of Faden suture was done, as you see over here, right in front of the inferior oblique muscle. So we didn't divide inferior oblique muscle to mobilize the medial rectus muscle. And at end of the surgery, a forced duction test was done to confirm absence of induced restriction following the surgery. This is the post-operative result that we achieved in this particular child. There was a small exotropia post-operatively. There was no diplopia, and 2 prism of hypertropia was found. There was a small adduction available, around 2 millimeter of adduction was there post-operatively in the right eye. So why did we choose this procedure in this patient instead of doing routine vertical muscle transposition? Because it was necessary to perform medial rectus recession in this patient because FDT was +3 to +4. Because it was an irradiated orbit, we were, as well as excentrated, partially excentrated orbit, we wanted to avoid operating on the vertical recti because there is a significantly high incidence of anterior segment ischemia in these patients, as well as post-operative healing can be poor once you operate on vertical muscles where there are more ciliary vessels. Infraplacement of both the horizontal portion could be done to a small exotropia in this patient. And of course, we chose the inferior half to be transposed instead of superior, because working around the superior oblique, superior rectus, and the other important structures superiorly was supposed to be more comorbid. The advantages in this patient is the partial preservation of the adduction was achieved. The untransposed portion of the medial rectus could have been on an adjustable suture, which can post-operatively give us additional adduction and better alignment if required. And of course, because we didn't work on the vertical muscles, we had better preservation of the ciliary vasculature. We do feel that there is limitation in this particular procedure, such as passing the portion of the medial rectus beneath the inferior rectus and mobilizing it without working on inferior oblique can be difficult for inexperienced surgeons. Of course, there is a theoretical probability of co-contraction and globe retraction in adduction. However, it was not found in this particular child. And of course, THT SMR, the procedure we just described, is relatively more aggressive as compared to Nishida's procedure or the standard superior rectus or inferior rectus transposition with Faden suture. In conclusion, we feel is a use for the patients who have complete lateral rectus palsy, who have a failed transposition, vertical transposition procedure, or where the transposition is not possible. There is a short video over here. If I have time, I'll just run through it, demonstrating just the mobilization of the lower segment of the split medial rectus muscle, as you see over here. This is the Skippens hook, and the muscle is being mobilized.
Hello, doctor.
Yes, I'm done. As you see, it's not so difficult to mobilize, and then of course it was not difficult to even put a Fadden suture to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, doctor, for such an informative presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Meir.
I now call the second speaker.
Sabrina, you
Yes.
just wait.
Okay.
You just wait. You have to ask one or two questions. Dr. Meir, it was an excellent presentation, but only thing is in this sort of patients in which in one of the patients in which you find out that it was tight medial rectus. So transposition in this sort of patients will be a bit difficult.
So I agree, sir. If you do not recess the medial rectus in a significant amount, it becomes difficult to transpose, and then even putting it back to the insertion area of the lateral rectus is difficult. So many doctors would advise it's suturing quite behind, maybe 12, 15, even 20 millimeters posterior to the limbus. People have attached these muscles.
But that is on those muscles in which FDT is not positive.
Sure, sir. But in this particular patient, it was very easy to mobilize because we did 12 millimeter recession. So I would recommend doing a large recession of the untransposed muscle, and then you will be, and of course, a large posterior dissection is required to split the muscle as posteriorly as possible, sir.
Okay. Dr. Urmil, Dr. Nibha, you want to?
No comments, it's okay.
And Dr. Meir, it was an excellent presentation. I just wanted to know how many cases you have done like this. One. Because there's a reported complication of uveal effusion in these cases. Like I went through the literature. So they say that one of the complications besides the overcorrection and lack of adduction that can be there, uveal effusion is also there.
That is if you transpose both the halves, because the vortex veins as well as the optic nerve tends to get compressed between the two superior as well as inferior halves of the split muscle. In the technique, essentially what I just showed, only one half is being transposed. So the vortex vein won't get compressed as such, it's more likely to get displaced.
Okay, so optic nerve compression is also one of the known complications.
It will only get displaced. If you don't clamp it between two halves, if you just transfer only one half, you are unlikely to get that complication. That's why we decided to go for this kind of a procedure.
So we need some more cases to be operated like this for better. Thank you anyways. Thank you so much.
Dr. Nibha?
Yeah, I think enough.
Okay, Sabrina, you can call the next speaker.
Yes, I now introduce Dr. Meghna Solanki to please unmute herself and start the presentation. Over to you, doctor.
But the second speaker is Dr.
Dr.
Savleen. Yeah.
Just
check the list once.
Yes.
Dr. Savleen is the second
Dr.
speaker.
Savleen.
Should I go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, doctor, please.
A very good morning to all of you. I see we are kicking off AIOS by Squint session. So I'm talking about imaging extraocular muscle insertions, and I would be comparing the anterior segment OCT with the ultrasound biomicroscope in this presentation. So we know that precise measurement of extraocular muscle insertion distances preoperatively might be difficult when we have resurgical cases, especially. CT and MRI scans are not reportedly that accurate, and there has been literature which has supported the role of ultrasound biomicroscope as a proven alternative to gold standard caliper measurements. Of late, we have also seen the anterior segment OCT being reported to detect extraocular muscle insertion distances from the limbus. So we did a study to compare the wide field UBM and the swept source OCT, and then compare them with the gold standard caliper for imaging muscle insertion distances only in strabismus reoperations, because we feel that in treatment naive patients, we might not need a UBM or an ASOCT to detect muscle insertions. So it was a prospective comparative case series where we recruited patients aged 6 to 60 years who had a history of strabismus surgery and now wanted an additional strabismus surgeries or required one. Patients who could not have a good ASOCT scan or any conditions which precluded a UBM or an ASOCT like nystagmus or other corneal surface abnormalities were excluded. The muscle insertion distances were measured from the limbus by the ASOCT, and the same patient's same muscle was imaged on the UBM. Both the measurements were done by separate masked observers. The patient comfort was graded on a scale of 1 to 10, and we analyzed both the groups by the intra-class correlation coefficient on SPSS. We had recruited 13 patients with a mean age of 20 years. Most of them were lateral rectus. We had all sorts of diagnoses. We had residual esotropias, exotropias, even one case of DRS. And the mean deviation was around 24 prism diopters. They were all emetropic patients. We see on the left side that this is how a recessed medial rectus looked on the ASOCT, and on the right side, this is how the recessed medial rectus looked on the UBM scan. Again, a resected lateral rectus on the ASOCT, and on the right, there's a picture of the UBM. So we can see how the cleft between the muscle insertion and the sclera was much clearer on the ASOCT, making the identification of the muscle insertion quite simple and easy. We also saw that once we compared the ASOCT with the caliper reading intraoperatively, as well as the UBM, both of them did not give us much different readings from the caliper reading, but the reading was less than 1 mm by the ASOCT in around 70% cases as compared to the UBM only in 40%. There was an agreement between ASOCT and caliper, which was excellent compared to the UBM, which also gave a good correlation. The maximum distance that we could measure on the ASOCT was 14 mm and 10.4 mm on the UBM. Also, in patients who had undergone previous large recessions, we could not localize the muscle by the UBM. The patients also scored the ASOCT better as compared to the UBM. And of course, the time taken to record the non-contact ASOCT was much less than the UBM. We also could identify scars, stretch scars and pseudotendons on the ASOCT, for example, this one. And you can see that this is the scar or the pseudotendon from the previous surgery, and this is where the actual muscle starts on the ASOCT, vis-a-vis on the UBM, where the pseudotendon is not very clear. This is the intra of patient, the picture of the same patient, where you see this is where the original insertion was. This is the previous surgery leading to a stretch scar. The hook tells us now the muscle is at this position. This is the medial rectus being imaged. So we use this, this technology to treat cases of resurgeries, which helped us in preoperative planning. Here, the patients had undergone a history of squint surgery. The records were not available. The patient had an esotropia surgery and ultimately landed up with a consecutive exotropia. Here, the medial rectus was imaged and was found to have a stretch scar. So we advanced it and got a good outcome because of the ASOCT. Further, on ASOCT, sometimes very thin fibrotic muscles can also be identified, which might be difficult to identify on the UBM. Large distances around 13 mm on the ASOCT are easily measured, and on the UBM, sometimes you cannot localize these muscles. So ASOCT measurements in our paper were more accurate, more posterior, and it was obviously graded as more comfortable by the patient. So it was the first study comparing the ASOCT and UBM, and the swept source could transit to delineate the muscle insertion very accurately. They were more comfortable, and in larger recessions, the wide field UBM was suboptimal. This paper is already accepted for publication in JAPOS, and I would like to acknowledge Dr. Jaspreet for this paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Savleen, for an excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to ask one or two questions. One thing is sample size is quite small.
Yes,
so I think you must continue this excellent study further so that we can get large sample size and that will be more authenticated.
Yes, sir. It was just a pilot of 13 patients.
Yeah.
We are still continuing because they were all resurgeries. So resurgeries on the same eye also done very less. We have patients who often do not give consent, to operate the good eye.
Yours is a advanced center where a lot of re-surgery patients might be
Yes.
coming.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely continue it. Thank you so much, sir.
And secondly, if somebody asks from you that you have to recommend one investigation, so will you recommend ASOCT or UVM, and in which cases you will recommend ASOCT, and from your study, in which cases you will recommend UVM, and what is the role of dynamic MRI in this sort of patients?
Thank you for that excellent question. Sir, ASOCT definitely, if it is available over UVM, I would say in more than 99% cases, I would first image on the ASOCT. It's hardly 1 in 100 that I would, not be able to image on the ASOCT and then take the patient for UVM. UVM, I would, do it for patients who are really uncooperative on ASOCT. If I'm taking them for surgery and I'm giving them general anesthesia, only that case I would do a UVM. Otherwise, for very young children also, it is a very quick technique. It just takes 3 or 4 seconds. So ASOCT can be tried in the OPD. It's non-touch, so it's obviously better than the UVM. Of course, the accuracy is much more, and the localization of the muscle, because it's very clear. And dynamic MRI, sir, is very good technology to locate slip muscles, lost muscles, and I think all kind of muscle contractile abnormalities. But the dynamic MRI does not give the insertion very accurately from the limbus, and I think that is the most important deciding factor for a surgical dose determination. So for insertion distances, I would prefer an ASOCT and not.
What is the difference in the cost of the two procedures, Naveen?
Ma'am, the ASOCT machine, if you are in a tertiary center, would cost you around, say, 20-25 lakhs. And the UBM, the latest one, also costs approximately the same. So cost.
So what cost to the patient in a private setup? Government, I can't say, but in a private, what would be the cost?
Ma'am, I think it would be the same as you charge for an ultrasound, maybe. So an ultrasound and the UBM are primarily the same machine and just a different probe.
And isn't the MRI more better for this compartmental contraction of extraocular muscle visualization?
Yes, ma'am. For contraction, definitely. For any contractile problem that we are looking at, MRI would be better, because ASOCT and UBM, although they are real time, they will never detect the contractile property of the muscle. They will just tell us this is where the muscle is and this is how it looks. And that also a very small area from the limbus. So we cannot go back. Actually, we might be measuring only the tendon. We might not be actually looking at the muscle also. So it is just for an insertion distance, not at all for contractile property.
Yeah, that's right. Great. As always.
To interrupt you, doctors, can we move to our next speaker, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I introduce the next speaker, Dr. Saili Mahajan, to please unmute herself and start the presentation. Over to Dr. Saili, please.
Travesmal surgery in large angle esotropia, a savior in disguise, nil financial disclosure.
Dr. Sayali, you're not very audible. Please, can you just look over your audio?
Now, ma'am, am I audible properly?
Yeah, now it's better.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Nil financial disclosure, consent was taken by parents. So in large angle esotropia, our primary goal is to achieve early orthotropia for binocular single vision. So in these cases, either a bilateral recession were done, but there were shown to be much cases of residual esotropia, or a bimedial recession with extra unilateral lateral rectus resection were done. But in these cases, an extra muscle had to be sacrificed. So we thought, why not augment the uniformly done bimedial recession with botulinum toxin? Botulinum toxin, it inhibits muscle spindles at neuromuscular junction, doesn't cross blood-brain barrier. Peak occurs in 3 to 5 days and lasts for around 3 months. The permanent effects are seen due to change in length tension curve and sarcomere density. It was approved by US FDA for paretic strabismus and blepharospasm and hemifacial spasms. In squints, it is traditionally used in small angle esotropia for around 30 to 40 prism diopters. In large angle, also to buy time-till surgery and decrease in incidence of amblyopia. Also, it is used in acquired non-accommodative esotropias. So in our study, we included children with large angle esotropia of more than 50 prism diopters and prospectively followed them. We excluded children who had hypersensitivity to botulinum toxin, who had known neuromuscular disorders, third, fourth, sixth nerve palsies, nystagmus, dissociative vertical deviations, incompetence of more than 5 degrees in horizontal gaze, accommodative esotropias, previous strabismus surgeries, and presence of ophthalmic pathologies that could prevent binocular functions. Preoperatively, the amblyopia was treated. Vision were assessed with Lea paddles. Cycloplegic refraction was done. Deviation was measured with Kimsky test and prism bar cover test. Ocular movements were assessed to rule out any paresis or restriction. The surgery was performed by a single surgeon. Bilateral medial rectus recession of 6 mm was done from insertion, along with 1.5 mm of conjunctival recession. After recession, 2.5 units of botulinum toxin was injected in medial rectus of the non-dominant type. Mean surgical time was noted to be 16 minutes. Post-operatively, follow-up was done after 1 week, 12 weeks, 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. At each post-operative visit, vision was assessed, sensory fusion was assessed with Burford dot test, and stereopsis was assessed with Titmus fly test. Our primary outcome was considered to be successful if deviation was less than 8 prism diopters or the patient was also orthotropic. We also assessed achievement of stereopsis by Titmus and side effects and number of resurgeries needed for successful outcome. So in our study, there were 14 patients, 1 to 3.5 years of age. Mean age at surgery was 15 months. Mean refractive error was plus 1.5 diopter sphere. Mean preoperative esotropia was 16 prism diopters, and at post-operatively 1 week, 20 prism diopter of exotropia was noted, which reduced to 12 prism diopters by 1 month and 2 prism diopters by 3 months. So at 3 months post-operatively, 13 of our children had successful outcome, but 1 child developed consecutive exotropia of 25 prism diopters. Transient ptosis was noted in 2 mm was noted in 1 patient, which resolved by 10 days. No vertical deviations were noted, no re-injections were required. So this is a picture of one of our child showing large angle esotropia. By 3 months, he was orthotropic. 5 of our children showed transient exotropia at 1 month, but by 3 months, they were also orthotropic. While 1 child showed consecutive esotropia at 3 months post-operative follow-up due to lack of compliance with amblyopia treatment. So as seen in literature, Scott et al. Showed bimedial recession of 6 mm resulted in 63% undercorrection. But in our study, none showed undercorrection. While Steger and Weekly showed 33% consecutive exotropia with large bimedial recession of 8 mm. Camaglia et al. Showed 17% consecutive exotropia with a 3 muscle surgery. In our study, 7.14% showed consecutive exotropia. So with botulinum toxin augmentation, early alignment can be achieved, especially in those children who have good vision in both eyes. A third muscle is saved for the future. There's decrease in anesthesia time. Lesser amount of consecutive exotropia is noted due to temporary effect of botulinum toxin. It is a simpler, quicker, and less traumatic procedure. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sayali. It was an excellent presentation, but I still feel that though the literature has said that it is very good for the large angle as well as for the small angle esotropias, but generally, don't you think that it's a very unstable sort of a thing? Because many patients, though your study does not show so much of consecutive exotropia, but would it be better that first you do the botulinum toxin injection, see the result for up to 3 to 6 months, and then go in for recession instead of doing both the things together?
Ma'am, then anesthesia would have to be given twice or thrice. In this, in a single procedure, both are done.
That's what I'm saying. The literature says, I mean, many people have said that even when you're doing it together, though your study has not proved it, you have, I think, around 13, 14 patients you've done, right?
Yes, yes.
So majority of the patients who have been given botulinum toxin along with the recession at one sitting, they have shown that they have consecutive exotropia. The chances of overcorrections are quite a lot because it's a very unstable result.
Okay.
By the time the stability of the botulinum toxin result comes out, many of the patients, they are shown to have exotropias. So maybe you could have done a much more number of patients to actually establish that this is good.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Dr. Sayali, a better thing would have been if you would have done a randomized study of two-stage procedure versus one-stage procedure.
Yes, ma'am.
So that would have given the basically better outcome. And secondly, this is basically a temporary. This botulinum toxin is the effect is temporary.
Yes, sir. So,
So it is not a permanent solution. Sooner or later, you have to go for the surgery for the third muscle.
yes,
Another question.
What was the
I wanted-
longest follow-up? What was the longest follow-up?
2 years. 2 years. 2 years.
One question I wanted to ask, you said your age range was between 1 to 3.5 years.
Yes.
Was there any correlation between the success and the age at which you operated?
No, ma'am. There was no, as such, we just took 1.35 to 3.5 years. In that, we didn't divide like 1 to 2 or 2 to 3.5. We just
What
took
was-
that as a whole cluster.
What was your comparison related to binocularity between these patients and the ones who only undergo surgery? Any comparison related to that?
Actually, ma'am, how much ever stereopsis and titmus with both four daughters we could compare, there were suboptimal stereopsis which was noted, which is comparable to the surgical procedures that we had seen before.
Botulinum is known
Sorry to
to be
interrupt,
giving
but-
less of binocularity compared to the surgical procedure.
Yes, ma'am. So that is why
Okay.
combined we thought. So that till the temporary effect of botulinum toxin wears off, the child would already develop a binocular fusion. So it will be better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saili. We now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Shilpa Rao, to please unmute herself, switch on the camera, and start the presentation. Over to Dr. Shilpa. Dr. Shilpa?
I think Dr. Silva is not there. Next doctor
Okay.
you can ask.
Okay.
To the next.
Dr. Rupak Brahma Chaudhary. Is Dr. Rupak present?
It's also not
He's also
there.
not there. Go next.
Ipsita Muni.
Dr. Ipshita Muni?
She was there, I think.
He was there earlier, but now I don't think so. In this is there.
Maybe she is disconnected. We can try for the next one and then we can take her back.
We can go for Rahul Singh.
Dr.
Rahul.
Singh Rahul. Dr. Singh Rahul?
Priya.
Dr. Priya Saraf?
Dr. Atul Kruti Gupta is there, I think so. Dr. Gupta.
Yes, sir.
In the meantime, I think you should get in touch with these speakers. There must be some problem with their joining. So
Sabrina,
many
you
people
call,
absent.
Yes, doctor.
you call all these people. You
Yeah,
might have
please
your
call
number.
these
Yes, doctor. I'll call them up.
Okay, so who is presenting now? Atul.
Dr. Atul Yakruti Gupta.
Okay.
Doctor, please switch on the camera and unmute yourself. Thank you, doctor.
Dr.
But his
Gupta,
paper is
you are
not
not,
to
you are
be
not a
marked.
ratified member,
Okay.
and so your presentation will not be marked. Okay.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Now you can start.
Good morning. I am Dr. Atulya Kriti Gupta, presenting true muscle transplantation surgery for large angle exotropia, a case series. Nil financial support and sponsorship, and there are no conflicts of interest. A very large angle exotropia can be quite challenging to manage. Available techniques utilize variable permutations of muscle recession procedures and or muscle resection procedures on 2 or more muscles, which may be combined with botulinum toxin, central tenectomy, spacers, and we also have hangback and hemi-hangback recession procedures. Nevertheless, deliberation still exists as to what would be the best management. Hence, we present true muscle transplantation as a possible alternative. 7 patients with more than 70 prism diopters of sensory exotropia who emphasized on a single eye surgery were subjected to thorough refraction and preoperative evaluation after the IRB approval. Post-operative follow-up was done at 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. In this surgery, a portion of the medial rectus muscle was resected and joined to the lateral rectus muscle with non-absorbable sutures to form a muscle complex, which was then recessed as per the standard recession procedures. 6 millimeters of medial rectus muscle was resected in all the patients, which is the maximum permissible limit, and joined to the lateral rectus muscle to form a muscle complex, which was then recessed. This muscle complex was recessed by 8 millimeters to correct a preoperative deviation of 70 prism diopters. With every 5 prism diopters increase in the deviation, the recession of the muscle complex was increased by 0.5 millimeters. At 6 months, we observed that 2 patients were orthophoric, 2 patients were left with less than 5 prism diopters of residual exotropia, and 3 patients were left with roughly 5 to 10 prism diopters of residual exotropia. Therefore, in these 7 patients, the mean angle of deviation reduced from a preoperative value of 77.14 plus minus 4.52 prism diopters to a postoperative value of 4.71 plus minus 4.42 prism diopters at 6 months. Follow-up at 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months and beyond showed stable results with no limitation of extraocular movements, especially abduction, as can be seen here. On reviewing the literature, we observed the standing surgical techniques have limitations of their own. Excessive amount of resection or recession may bring about many disfigurements, like anophthalmos, narrowing of the palpebral fissure, and considerable amount of limitation of abduction when more than 6 millimeters of medial rectus muscle was resected. The hangback muscle recession may produce muscle collapse, which effectively increases the recession, thereby making the results less predictable. The elongation of muscle with spacers also poses a threat of extrusion, and the prolonged surgical time, along with surgical scars at the operation site, when 3 or more muscles are operated bilaterally, lessens the interest of surgeons in these methods. Hence, we present true muscle transplantation as a possible alternative in treating large angle sensory exotropia. The expediency of true muscle transplantation surgery in managing large angle strabismus, primarily esotropia, has already been demonstrated with desirable results. A study by Amitava et al. Showed orthophoric results in patients with large angle esotropia who underwent primary true muscle transplantation. A study by Chathani et al. On the long-term results of true muscle transplantation for very large angle esotropia showed augmentation of the surgical results. It was thus concluded that true muscle transplantation is a possible alternative for very large angle esotropia. Utilizing the same principle, we did this case series on managing large angle exotropia, where in addition to the stated benefits of being an autograft with virtually nil likelihoods of rejection and giving enhanced results via effectually increasing the muscle length, we found that true muscle transplantation is a simple uniocular procedure on 2 muscles that gives prolonged stable results. In conclusion, a simple uniocular procedure, true muscle transplantation, giving long-term stable results is a technique worth bearing in mind while managing large angle sensory exotropia. These were my references. Thank you.
Dr. Gupta, what were the drawbacks? What are the drawbacks of your procedure? You have told all the advantages and good points about your procedure. So, what are the difficulties or what
So the
are the
drawback
possible
would
drawbacks?
be that the sample size for our study is very small as of now. We have done 7 patients. So for a lot, and only we have followed them up till 1 year. We would like to do a larger sample size with a further duration of follow-up to comment on the longer term, because as for the duration that we saw, we did not see any complications as such. There was no limitation of the extraocular movements. We did not have any undercorrection or overcorrection. So maybe a bigger sample size and a longer duration would give us more hints.
Does your study actually show us anything new or anything different? Because you've already said that all this has been established by the various previous surgeons. So by doing a very small case series of 7, have you come to any other inference out of your study?
The literature that we have referred to actually has only shown about the esotropia, and for exotropia, the sample size for them have been around 3 to 4 patients. So we have gone a little further by adding 4 more patients.
I think that is not sufficient actually to establish anything. Should have been a bigger series.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe you can continue with this further on.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Gupta, what was the largest angle that you corrected of exotropia?
Ma'am, we've corrected around 80 prism diopters.
And what any average?
85, I'm sorry.
Okay, any average you have come across made out of your inference that for every 1 millimeter surgery that you are doing, how much is the correction, average correction you're getting?
Yes, ma'am. For every for medial rectus, for every 1 millimeter, we got a correction of 4 prism diopters, and for lateral rectus, with every 1 millimeters, there was 3 prism diopters correction.
Yes, that is the difference is there in both lateral. Yes, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Sabrina.
Yes, doctor. Dr. Rupak is not going to present.
Okay.
And Dr. Ispita Muni is not answering my call.
Okay. Very good.
And the next
Dr. Rahul Singh.
Dr. Rahul Singh says that he is not able to join through the link. He has not received any link.
Okay. And then Priya.
Dr. Priya
Sraf.
Dr. Priya Siraf is also not answering my calls. I'll just try once again, doctor.
So you try once again. If nobody is answering, then we can conclude this session.
There is one more, Dr. Kartika Bhaskaran.
She is there.
I don't know, but there is one person.
So I'm asking to call all the presenters.
Yeah, Shilpa Rao, all these we can try once.
Shilpa Rao is telling that she already posted that she is not present.
Okay.
Dr. Urmil, I think it is their duty to join
Yes,
on
sir.
time. If they are not
Yes.
joined,
Actually, Dr.
mark
Prasad, lot of presenter, they send the presentation but didn't register. So that's why they didn't receive the mail.
Yes, that must be one reason.
It is administrative affair and that is on.
So we have marked 3 presentations only.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 presentations, so we can
That
mark
we have
those 3 and
Do we have
keynote address?
Fourth presentation we have done.
No, sir, 3 we have done.
fourth is
Not to be marked.
basically not ratified.
Yeah.
Not ratified member.
Yes.
Marking is for 3 only.
Only
3 only.
And what about the keynote address?
So
Keynote
Siddharth is there.
Dr. Siddharth also is not there.
Okay, then,
I am just calling him.
You just call
For 5 minutes.
Even I'll call Dr. Priya. I'll
Yeah.
just inform. Yes.
We can wait for 5 minutes.
We can wait for 5 minutes, and if nobody turns up, then we can give marking only for those who have presented.
सर और AIOS कैसा चल रहा है? आप इतने अच्छे से संभाल रहे हो.
मैं कहाँ संभाल रहा हूँ? मैं तो
सर आप बहुत active and very positive role you have, and we all observe and we really appreciate that. So
हम तो मैडम सच्चाई के लिए लड़ रहे हैं।
नहीं, तभी तो अच्छा लगता है सर, तभी तो हम भी साथ हैं।
But somehow
Thank
ऐसा
you.
लगता है कि Dr. Subhash Tadia is present everywhere, doing everything at all the time.
And right thing, ma'am. The
Right
best
thing,
thing is the
definitely,
right thing.
definitely. Yeah.
तो इसीलिए नहीं तो नहीं अच्छा लगता, बट राइट थिंग लगती है तभी अच्छा लगता है।
चलो मैम, ठीक है।
नहीं, अच्छी बात है सर। सर स्पॉसी का भी ध्यान रखो थोड़ा।
स्पॉसी तो अब आप लोगों के हवाले है। हम तो
नहीं, आप सर, आप पैटर्न हो, आप
Always there.
हमारे।
नहीं, हम तो गाइडेंस के लिए हमेशा तैयार हैं।
हाँ, नहीं वो तो है।
You're
Doctor,
doing good work, Dr. Subhash.
Huh?
Really, it's good to see you working like this.
वो तो आप लोगों को तैयार कर दिया ना, स्पॉसी संभालो अब आप। हमने तो बहुत संभाल ली।
नहीं सर,
पर guidance तो चाहिए Dr. Subhash आपको
हाँ, तो
definitely.
मैं कब मना कर रहा हूँ, हम तो हमेशा अवेलेबल हैं। डॉक्टर प्रोमिता, आप भी काफी टाइम से है ना इनएक्टिव हैं।
Really, I've been very inactive. I must come
मैम
back.
where are you? Kindly let me have
कलकत्ता।
कोलकाता।
Yeah.
In which
2006 के बाद आप डिसअपियर हो
I
गए।
know. Many years. I went after a long time to last year's conference at Madras.
So you are in the medical college only, ma'am?
No, private practice, purely
Okay, yeah.
private practice.
Sir, Dr. Sridhar is not reachable.
Okay, then
even Dr. Priya, her phone is switched off.
So we can conclude this session and we can give marking to these three.
Yes.
Okay,
sir.
Sabrina, thank you.
Okay, doctor. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
doctor.
Bye,
Thank you.
Sableen.